newspaper, the London Financial Times, describes it as a de facto world government with its own institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, the new World Trade Organization, the GATT, the G7 the executive branches of the 7 rich countries. That's a kind of a framework of world government, what they call a de facto world government, that also operates very remotely, in secret, without scrutiny, without accountability. Its primary constituents are, in fact, precisely the transnational corporations and the financial institutions, and it reflects their interests. The new trade agreements, which is a rather misleading term in my opinion, but the trade agreements are accelerating this transfer of effective power to these absolutist, unaccountable institutions, now on a vast scale. Corporations themselves are absolutist institutions. Power lies in the hands of owners and managers. The only debate is about how that's how you divvy out the shares. Debate in literature about that. There's a fairly strict authority structure in a corporation. An individual can sometimes enter into the hierarchy, which means you essentially take orders from above and transfer orders down below. It's a fairly strict hierarchy, as much as any we know of in any institution. If you're an outsider, you're not part of it, you have basically nothing to say. You're allowed to rent yourself to it. That's called getting a job. You can buy what they sell if you like. You can watch. You can't see very much because they operate mostly in secret. And now that they're remote enough to be transnational and have their governing institutions in Brussels and Geneva and so on, they are even more operating in secret. Actually, this is all well-known and old stuff. I was at about 10 years ago, I was at a conference in Switzerland on international affairs, and one of the participants was a Swiss diplomatic historian. In fact, he told me he was the Swiss diplomatic historian from the University of Geneva. We got kind of friendly, and we were out having a beer or something one night, and he told me that the worst job in the world is to be a Swiss diplomatic historian. And the reason for that is quite simple. Diplomatic historians are people who look at archival materials primarily. They try to figure out what's going on by looking at the archives. Well, in most countries, there's a sort of a buffer between private power, which basically rules, and policy. The buffer is called the government. And you can look at and governments do leave a kind of a paper trail. And we're pretty good in that respect by comparative standards. So, you wait 30, 35 years, and sometimes even earlier, and you get some kind of a record, in fact, often quite an interesting and complete record of what the government was up to. But in Switzerland, they don't bother with the buffer. The corporations just rule straight. So they make the decisions, the banks and the transnationals and so on, and corporations don't leave any paper trail at all. They are secret societies. They're secret absolutist organizations. If you learn anything about them, it's because, the multinational operations committee in Congress in the mid-70s, under the pressure of the popular movements of the 60s, in fact, got subpoena power and released some information about them, and occasionally find something out in other ways, but basically you learn nothing. So being a Swiss diplomatic historian without this kind of intervening level leaves you with not a lot to do. He was complaining, well, we have something to do because there is this transmission bill, but the picture is, it's not all that different if you think about it. If you think about where power actually is, how decisions are made, and how much you can find out about the centers of power. Well, this has its consequences, naturally. For example, the other aspects of the deficiencies of democracy, I can't even use the word, the absurdity of using the term democracy to refer to the Soviet system of tyranny. In various respects, we also have the same features. Information is very narrowly concentrated in pretty much the same hands as other decision-making. The major media are just huge corporations selling, people like you, selling audiences to other businesses, to advertisers. And that sets the framework within which most of the rest operates. Actually, we have, it's a different information system. and all sorts of different properties. One of the properties is that people here have much less access. They have access. They don't seek access to other sources of information. So the proportion of the population here that listens to foreign broadcasts is minuscule, and publications that are outside the very narrow and rigid ideological framework reach statistically insignificant part of the population, nothing like, say, Soviet Samizdat. There are reasons for that, and they're interesting ones, but again, that's another topic. With regard to popular organizations that permit the people to function in the political sphere, there's very limited. We don't have functioning political parties, we don't have political clubs, there's very little in that way, and furthermore, most people are indeed so busy trying to survive that even if such organizations existed, and even if information were readily available, there'd be a limited amount that they could do with it. And under such conditions, again, democracy is a fairly thin reed. I don't want to suggest that here it's like under Soviet tyranny, but some of the structural properties are quite similar and worth thinking about. These are the kinds of reasons why classical Democrats and libertarians were so hostile to corporate power. Now, they didn't really see it. They were on the classical period. I mean, people like Thomas Jefferson, they were only witnessing the very early incipient moments of what was going on, but enough to see it and not to like it. So Thomas Jefferson in 1816 expressed his fear that the country, I'm quoting him now, that the country was moving toward a single and splendid government of an aristocracy founded on banking institutions and moneyed in corporations. And if that tendency, which was just beginning, continued, he said, it would be the end of democracy and freedom. The few would be riding and ruling over the plundered plowman and the beggared yeomanry. Well, that was 1860. A decade later, period of Jacksonian democracy, Jefferson was a little more optimistic. Right before his death, in fact, I think hours before his death, he spoke at the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And in speaking there, he made a crucial distinction, which is worth paying careful attention to. He distinguished, I'll use his words, between those who fear and distrust the people and wish to draw all powers from them into the hands of the higher classes, that's one category, and the others are those who identify with the people, have confidence in them, cherish and consider them as the most honest and safe depository of the public interest, even though not the most wise. That's the second category of people, and he was hoping that the second category would be in the ascendancy. Well, looking now, that was 1826, it's clear, it should be clear to any observer that Thomas Jefferson's worst fears have been realized. Effective power is indeed in the hands of the higher classes. The early institutions of banking institutions and moneyed in corporations that he was concerned about are now vast in power and control and dominate the decision-making system, essentially secret. And modern democratic theory, interestingly, is based on, has veered very sharply from Jeffersonian ideas, and in fact is precisely based on fear and distrust of the people, who must not be allowed to determine public policy or enter into the public arena because, as contemporary thinkers put it, they are too stupid and ignorant. They agree with Jefferson only on one point, that the people are perhaps not the most wise, but they disagree with them on everything else. And that's rather important. I'll return to that. Well, if we go back earlier, say half a century earlier, to Adam Smith, he was describing a world that is very different from ours, so much so that the descriptions and the explanations really don't carry over very well, but the ideas do. He lived too early to see the